Let's talk about Resonator cigar box guitars. I'm sure you're familiar with the Resonator guitars. Very simple principle. As the strings are plucked and as they vibrate, they transmit that sound down through the saddle into this cone, and it has the act of amplifying the sound. They were initially made to kind of be a little bit louder guitar than a standard acoustic guitar. It was a way of amplifying the sound. Let's talk about the components that we've recently come up with that you can use to build a cigar box guitar resonator, or you build any type of box guitar that would be a resonator. We have now the products that you'll need. Recently we came up with a line of components. First being the cone. This is something that's very typical. Other cones are out there. This is our version, 6 inches in diameter, aluminum. Ours is not spun. A lot of people ask if it's hand spun. No, ours is made in another process and it's formed. We think it'll work just as well. Maybe not as romantic as a hand spun, but we think it'll still work. And it'll be economic and everybody will be able to use them. We're going to have this in 2 versions. Currently on our website we have the aluminum, but we soon will have a copper version. And the copper really gives you a lot of options. It's just really beautiful material. It's going to tarnish. If you want to, you can put some acid, you can change the color. You can do a lot with copper. You can even paint these if you want to. We also have available with these some covers. One we call the spoke, stainless steel, made to fit exactly on the top of either of these covers. It's got a bolt pattern on here so you can screw it down to the box. We also have a different pattern that we call the sunburst. Nice different design. We have 2 options. We'll probably come up with some other ones as we go forward. One of the components we also have is called a biscuit, and that's the name of the component that sits on top of the cone. It's also the component that holds the saddle, which in this case is a bone saddle. And again, you would treat this much like you do any other bone saddle. You would need to scribe it and file it to put the strings through. But again, the strings will vibrate through the cone and you'll get a nice sound. There's also kind of a different sound. It has a little bit of kind of a tinny metal sound. So they really are distinct. Same thing you have with like a license plate guitar, where it has kind of a unique sound of its own. Well, let's talk a little bit about how you would install this. We just got these products in. I haven't had a chance to build a full guitar, but I've got started on one so you can see here. So let's talk about some of the important things about installing a resonator. Installing a resonator is really a very precise operation. On a lot of the other things you do, you have a little bit of a wiggle room because some of those components can be adjusted. For example, a normal bridge has a lot of adjustment. If you get within 1/4 of an inch, you can adjust it and get that scale length right. You don't have the same flexibility with a resonator. There's some things you can do with a neck, but for the most part, you need to be pretty precise. And let's talk about this. Here's a little tip. Get some shelf paper. Buy it at Walmart, just plain old white shelf paper. What I've done is I've covered this box because again, it's very critical that I know exactly where I'm going to put this cone. I've got a neck here, and again, it's 25-inch scale length. So what I've done is I'm sliding my cover onto the neck, taking my tape measure, I'm measuring down, and I'm putting a mark at 25.5 because that's the scale length, 25.5 inches. Then I used my squares. I drew a line perpendicular across there. I have a center line running up the center. So I know that exactly at that point, right there at the intersection of those 2 lines, is exactly where I want the center of that cone. Now there's a little bit of wiggle room and we'll talk about it, but it's very critical that we know exactly where that location is, and it's exactly 25.5 inches away. Well, the next step is cutting that out, cutting that hole out. And we are offering a tool, going to have it available on our website, that we think will make that easier. And what it is basically a template. And the template has a couple of guide marks. And again, if you've marked your lines, you can simply lay this template on there, line it up. There's holes here, and then we're going to adjust with the side holes, with the side marks. And so now, based upon these marks, I now know exactly where that resonator cone should go. And I come in, hold this down, and I mark it, and now I've got the hole that I need. And by the way, for a 6-inch resonator cone, the hole needs to be about 5 1/4 inches. So you can come back now, however you want to cut this. Maybe you have a jigsaw, maybe you have a handsaw, maybe you use a Dremel tool. There's a lot of different ways of cutting this hole. You can cut it, file it, sand it, and get it perfectly round so it would look basically like this. Drop in your resonator cone and you're good to go. One thing to keep in mind, these lines here are really helpful, because what that could do is, again, the way these covers are made, you can now line up a top and a bottom, and that'll get it in the center this way. You can line up these holes over here, and that will get it lined up this way. Drill your holes, and that will make sure that the resonator cone is centered right over that center mark that's very critical. So again, that's really what you need to do to cut the opening. There's a lot of other things you can do as far as putting it together. There's a lot of ways you can get that sound. Piezos are a way to go, pickups are a way to go, the combination of both, a lot of experimentation. On this one, what I did is I took one of our piezos and I put it inside on the back side of the cone, and then of course I put the pickup here. I have a nice one of our hot tunas up here. In this case, I'm using a new wiring harness that we've got coming out shortly. It's called a blending pot. And what that actually does is it hooks up both the piezo and the hot tuna, and then depending on how you adjust it, you can fade it from one to the other. And it really is helpful with piezos because they're always kind of so loud, so sensitive, and they make a lot of noise. And we tend to need to tone those down and make sure the pickups come out. But again, you can experiment. The important thing is to get a reso, get it in a box, get it lined up, get it adjusted. Sometimes if you have to, you might need to just move that biscuit around just a little bit to get the intonation right. By the way, while I'm talking about it, on this biscuit, this bone saddle is not in the center as you might expect. It's actually offsides a little bit. In other words, this line here is actually in the very center of the biscuit, and the saddle sits to the other side of it. So again, if everything's lined up perfectly, it should work out fine, and you should be able to maintain your scale length on there. If not, there is a little bit of room. Our biscuit is a little bit smaller than the flat spot, so you have some room to move it a little bit. You can also maybe change the angles a little bit if you want to adjust the tonation, but you got to stay pretty close. Well, I hope this is helpful. This is something you should try, something you should add to your line of guitars. I think you'll like it. Makes a different sound. Really good idea. Thank you very much. Keep in touch. Let us know if we can help you. Thank you.